I'm continuing my kit bash of the historic Holt Hotel on Ron's Trains and Things right now. Hi, I'm Ron of Ron's Trains and Things, and if you'd like to see more videos about model railroading tips, tools, and techniques, then be sure and subscribe down below and hit that little bell icon so you can get notified every time I upload a new episode. In my last video, we started the process of kit bashing the historic Holt Hotel in downtown Wichita Falls, Texas, using 3 Hilltown Hotel kits from Design Preservation Models, as well as 2 two-story wall modules with windows from the same company. In that video, I showed you how I modified the kits in order to make a larger front for the building, as well as how I was going to use the modular walls to make the added 2 stories on the top of the building. Well, today we're going to continue that project by doing some more painting, some weathering. I'm going to scratch build some trim and details, and we're going to continue the assembly process by adding floors to each story, as well as roofs and back walls to the structure. You'll also want to watch for part 3 that will be coming out, where I'll be finishing this building, adding some more details and some interior lighting. That video will be coming out in 3 weeks, so you'll want to watch for that. I also want to remind you that next week I'll be sharing with you another scenery building video. It's one that I shot earlier and I'm going to be uploading because I'm going to be out of town. I'm going to be traveling to Houston, Texas to do some cleanup and recovery work in the wake of Hurricane Harvey. Because of that trip, the following week I will not have a model building video. I'm sorry to miss that week, but I think you'll understand the priority I have in making this trip. But the second week in October, we'll be back to our regular schedule, and I'll also be sharing details with you in that video about my rapidly upcoming monthly live stream. So you'll want to tune in and catch those details. Now, let's get over to the workbench and continue our kit bash of the historic Holt Hotel. Sometimes whenever you are scratch building or kit bashing, no matter how much you plan, no matter how good a mock-up you build up, you run into something that somehow you didn't expect. And as I was building this upper section of this structure using the Design Preservation Models modular wall sections, I knew as soon as I had put this together that I was probably going to have a problem. And the problem came in these corners. They have these 2-piece corners that are these little pylons. They're the same type of material that they give you to cover the seams where they come together in sections. And if you remember, I cut all of those pieces off and butt jointed all the wall sections together. But I thought it might make a nicer looking corner if I used the pylons in the corners. Well, the problem I ran into, and I realized almost immediately after I had glued it together, was that this building actually has a kind of trim that runs. It's got like its own cornice. Even though this upper section was added on, it's got a cornice that runs along the top, as well as kind of a trim piece that runs between the 2 floors that were added. And those pylons in the corners were really going to cause a problem for that trim. So sometimes you have to go back and adjust things and redo and re-engineer and rebuild things a little bit. So literally what I've done is I've taken this upper section, which I had assembled partly, and I've taken it apart. And I just had to go to the back and put some solvent cement in there and kind of soak that with a little solvent cement until the corner would come apart. And that's exactly what it did. You see it came apart here at the seam. And now what I'm doing is I'm coming with a razor saw, and I've got to cut this pylon piece off of all 3 of these wall sections, the front and both of the ends like this. I'm going to cut this in much the same way as I did the sections on the front, and I realized that I didn't get to do that on camera before, so I'm going to show you exactly how I do that right now. I'll show you with this little wall piece here, but these are all the same. What I want to do is I want to save all of the wall, and I don't want to smar or mark the wall. I just want to cut right up against this piece that I want to cut off. So literally I'm going to take my razor saw and slide it in really tight against the part where I want to cut, and then I'm actually going to come back with my fingers, just the tips of my fingernails, and kind of hold the saw in place. That'll help keep it from skipping out of the groove. And then I'm going to just start to saw very slowly and gently, especially at first, because your saw sometimes can want to skip and jump out of the groove when you're first making it. You want to go very slow and allow your fingernails, your fingertips to hold the saw in place. And there we go. I just got all the way through that, and there's that pylon piece that I had glued together, and I'll be discarding that into my scrap box. And then I'm going to come in with a sanding stick, a nice straight sanding stick, and just sand that edge down, remove any burrs left on the back or the ends from the sawing process. And got a little bit of a fuzzy burr there, and you see that's going to make a nice surface for gluing. And then what I'll be doing is I'll be coming in and butt joining these right into the end of the building, so that you don't see the end of the ends, but literally what you'll see from the front is the face of the building, and I'll be gluing the ends into the back of that. Now that I've got all those little corner pylon pieces cut off of all of my pieces, I'm ready to reassemble the ends to the front of this upper section. And so I've got my gluing jig out here again, because it helps me keep everything square. Now I want the front surface only to show from the front. I want to butt the sides into the back of that front section like this. So I'm laying the front down flat in my gluing jig. I've got my best square corner right here. I'm going to put that piece there and hold it in place. And then we're going to come in with a little bit of solvent cement, and I like to just tack it at first and make sure everything is perfectly in position, make sure everything is flush and square the way it's supposed to be. I'm going to hold that there for a minute. Looks like that's pretty square and flush on the end, and I think that'll paint up well. So I'm going to stick it back in here just again to keep it square, and I will finish gluing that joint all the way top to bottom, and we'll give that a minute again to set up, and then we'll be ready to turn it around and do the other end. I'm going to start now making the trim that's going to go on the upper section of the Holt Hotel, and I'm going to build this trim myself. Now, if you look at the reference photo that I have, you see there's a trim that goes between the floors that basically looks like kind of an L-shaped piece of trim, like a flat piece with another flat piece on top. Of course, it's all stone, but at least that's the way I'm going to make this. And then this cornice piece up here is a little more intricate. We're going to work on this piece between the floors first. And so what I'm using for that is basically just two pieces of stripped styrene. The first one is 15 thousandths by 80 thousandths. That'll be my base. And then my piece that I'm laminating on top of it is 20 thousandths by 40 thousandths. And so we're gonna basically layer these together in a way to just make a nice piece of L-shaped trim there. I want to flush them up along this top edge, and I want to work just a little bit at a time, because these pieces are so thin that they will bend in any direction very easily. So I'm going to just get a little piece in line and hold it in line where I want it. And then I'm going to come in with my touch and flow applicator, which is loaded up with solvent cement, and just put a little bead right along there. And I just realized I'm working on my cutting mat, and that's not a good idea, so I need to find a better working surface. Never a good idea to use solvent cement on top of a self-healing cutting mat, because it is made of a plastic material, and you literally will adhere your work material right to your work surface. Also, as you're using the touch and flow applicator, as I'm kind of gluing this together in spots, tacking it together, you don't want to get too close to your fingers. Capillary action will pull it along the material, and you literally can glue your fingers to the material. And I'm going to keep working my way down this strip that way, just trying to keep it nice and straight, flush on the top. And as you see, I'm just right now just tacking that in spots with just a drop of solvent cement. Now that I have that tacked, I'm going to run a bead all the way down along the full length of the piece. Again, you got to be careful so as not to push it out of position in between the areas that you have tacked it as you go. And there's what that piece of trim looks like once we've glued it together for the trim in between the two floors. Now we're going to work on our cornice trim, and for this we're going to use 4 pieces of strip of 3 different sizes. So to start off, we're going to put one of the pieces of the 15 thou by 40 thou aside, as well as the 40 thou quarter round. We're going to start with a piece of 20 thou by 80 thou and this 15 thou by 40 thou piece, and we're going to laminate them in exactly the same way as we did the strip for the trim in between the floors. Now that we have that piece in place, next we're going to come in with our quarter round piece. And we want to put this so that we have a flat edge going against the pieces we've started, the round edge pointing down, the other flat edge pointing up. And again, we're going to put it on here and just flush it up with the top edge. We'll see that we've got a pretty good looking piece of trim started here. These touch and flow applicators work great for fine work like this. If you've not used one, I highly recommend them. If you're not familiar with them, you might look on my channel. Back 2 or 3 months ago, I did a review where I talked about the touch and flow applicator, how it works, where you can get them, and you can check that video out. Learn all you need to know about the touch and flow applicator. Okay, there's that piece. Now this last piece, which is again a piece of 15 thou by 40 thou, I'm actually going to put it on edge and glue it right to the top to make a nice flat top piece. Just going to tack it along the back in some spots like we've been doing. I think that's looking pretty good, really. Lay it back on its back. I think I'll run a bead all along the front here. And here's our cornice trim now that we've got it done. Hope that the detail comes out on the camera. You can see you got kind of a nice stair-stepped thing down here below, this quarter round piece here. Of course, it'll go on the building this way, and then a nice flush, nice smooth flat top. And I think that's going to look good on the corner top of our building. Now I'm ready to start cutting my trim to fit on my building. And this is where this gets kind of tedious. Now, some of you are probably thinking, wow, I thought that gluing that trim together was tedious. Well, this could be even more so, because I want to make nice miter joints around the corners, and so I'm using my little miter box here, and I'm cutting these at 45-degree angles so I can make nice right corners. Now these will cut really easily. The trick is to hold them tight against the back of the miter saw while you make the cut, so you get a good clean cut. And that one was pretty easy. You see you got a nice 45-degree cut there. Bring my corner in here, and you see I line that mitered cut up right with the corner of the building right here. And then I'm going to come down to the other end of the building, and I'm going to mark the top of this right at the corner. And that is going to show me where I want my miter to begin, at the back at that mark, and 45 degrees out. So I'm going to come in with my miter box again. This time I got to hold the trim upside down. I want to cut right on that mark, so I got to line that mark up with my miter. And my no, it's a little dark back in there for the camera, but hopefully I think there you can see the mark. It's right there. I'm going to line it up with, starting off with that little slot in my miter box. I'm going to come in with my miter saw and slide it in here and make sure that it's going to cut right on that mark right at the back, and it is. And carefully cut through this. Okay, there is that piece. Cutting the pieces for the ends are a little easier because there I can make the miter on the end that I need for here, and then I can measure it and just mark it and cut a nice square cut on the other end. And bring these miters together at the corner so that they line up just perfectly. Like that. See, I got a nice tight corner there. And then I'm going to hold that really tight, and I'm going to come mark this at the back again. Now, what I did for the cornice trim up here on the top, I'm going to do the same for this piece of trim in between the two floors. I'm going to cut some miters on it and get it ready to go as well. And we will fit the corner here. Okay, now that I've got my trim made and preparing to put it on the upper couple of floors of the building here, I want to show you a couple things that I've done. First of all, I wasn't just real happy with the color that I had for these floors. It's a little bit of a too dark of a yellow that I had before. I wanted a little lighter color, a little more of a yellowish tan. So I didn't have exactly the color that I needed, but I did have a flesh colored paint. And I went back over this with just a light coat, kind of a wash almost, with the airbrush of that flesh-colored paint. And that over the yellow, the dark yellow that I already had on it, came to a color that I'm pretty happy with. And so I think this is more like I want the building to look. I needed to touch up a few things with the airbrush anyway. You see, I have come back after I've airbrushed, and I've used a sanding stick and gone along this top edge and just sanded the paint off, just kind of like this, just working it with my finger along to take a little bit of the paint off right there to give me a bare plastic surface on which I can glue my my cornice. And also, you see, I've made this line all the way across and around the sides of the building. That's going to be the top edge of that centerpiece of trim. And I'm going to take a sanding stick and do the same thing here. I'm going to go just below that line and go along and sand just a little strip of the paint off. It's kind of hard to do on camera at this angle, but I'm going to sand just a little of the paint off in a strip so that I have something, some bare plastic there that my solvent cement can bite into as I glue the trim onto that part of the building. Now, I've already painted my trim that we made a little while ago. Okay. So there is, now it's not straight, obviously we'll straighten it out as we put it on there, but there is that piece of trim that'll go across the middle. The cornice is actually a two-tone color on the original building, but the bulk of it is kind of a terracotta color, and so I had to kind of mix up a color, and this is the color I came up with, and I'm real happy with this color. I think it's going to make a nice look at the top. I also want to show you the windows from this upper section. I've gone ahead and painted these. Now, I could have airbrushed these, but I didn't have any white paint that I could use in my airbrush. I did have some white paint that would be good to brush on. So literally what I did is I just took these window sections and put them all on a piece of painter's tape on the sticky side and just went over and brush painted them. I used a wide brush and just did it really quickly, made sure it didn't glob. But you can go over these pretty fast. These go obviously much faster than the ones I have to detail on the main part of the structure, because these go in separately, and they go in these sections like this. Literally 3 windows together will go in all at one time. Get that to slide in there just like that, and so that's going to go very fast, and it's going to look really nice as those go in. You can see though, after I've painted them, I've gone back and sanded off some of the paint on the plastic in between the windows to give me a surface to glue to, and some of them are going to have to be trimmed around some of the corners and things, but we'll work on that as we get to installing them in a little bit. Someone suggested after the first video in this series that I show a little bit about how I go about painting these windows. A lot of people are afraid of design preservation model kits, especially the N-scale ones, because of this very fine detail of these windows. I find that with a little bit of practice, they are tedious. They do take time to paint, but not impossible at all. And so I want to show you kind of how I go about that. Now, I've painted all the windows on the front, but I still have to paint these large windows on the first floor of the front, and I also have to do the ends. As you see, I haven't done them yet at all. I'm going to work on a couple of one of these windows here in the front on the first floor, and show you just how I go about that. I'm using a very fine brush. This is an 18-aught brush. Get my finger there so you can see just how fine the bristles are on this brush. Very fine. The paint that I'm using is a Vallejo Model Color, which is a paint that's made specifically for brushing. And I dilute this paint just a tiny bit with some water as I use it. I don't dilute the paint that I pour out to use, but in my little cup here, my little cap, you probably can't see, but I've got some fresh paint right here and just a few drops of water, and every once in a while I will just dab my brush in the water a little bit to moisten it as I pick up some paint. That thins it ever so slightly and makes it go on a little bit more smoothly on these fine models. And so as I paint these, I come in with my fine brush, and I try to brush along the side of the detail that will be the contrasting color, so I can get right up along the detail that I'm painting white without actually painting the part that's next to it. If you try to paint with the ends of your bristles, it's too hard to get control that way, and your bristles can go everywhere and you can get paint in all kinds of places. Now, I'm not going to tell you. There you go, just an easy stroke like that. And you've got that piece painted. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I never get paint where I don't want it. The beauty of that is you can actually come back and touch this up, obviously, with some more of the earth color if I get some white paint where I don't want it. But again, with a little bit of patience, take your time, and of course, the more you practice, the better you'll get. You'll find that this maybe is not as impossibly hard as you might have made yourself believe. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to talk and do that detail painting at the same time. So I'm not going to do a lot of this. I know that watching someone paint detail work, it's about as exciting sometimes as watching paint dry, but there you get the idea in that window right there. Now I'm getting ready to install this trim that I made, and I've got this first piece, the trim that goes between the floors, just sitting in place here. I got it clamped with some of these handy little clamps that I make with clothespins by literally turning the clothespins around end for end inside of the springs. You can make a nice hard holding but delicate clamp. I also have some of these I've made out of these little tiny clothespins that they make for craft projects. Also very handy. Anyway, I'm going to pull this down just a little bit, enough to show you that, as you can see, I sanded away some of the paint right below that little line that I had made that I showed you earlier. And I have clamped this in place on the ends, just enough to make the corners match up, make sure that my length was right, right on that line. And I've also done the same with the trim pieces on the end with a single clamp. Now, we're not going to try to glue this whole thing with just these clamp positions, but we're going to start this process, and then we'll kind of work our way along. So what I've got my touch and flow applicator here, and I've got it loaded up with some solvent cement, and I'm going to begin by, and I'm going to work on the top of this trim, and I'm going to just put a touch to hopefully get this started right on the end here. And I want to do this carefully. And one thing I don't want to do is end up gluing my clamp to the trim, because capillary action will pull that along, and if you're not careful, you can definitely do that. So I'm going to just put a little glue on that end right there, and then I'm going to go ahead, I think, and work this corner. I want to make sure that that corner matches up just perfectly. It's on the line, and I got a perfect corner where those bevels come together. That actually looks really good. So I'm going to come and put just a drop right there as well, and that's going to get part of that side piece glued down and also the corner glued together. Now, I have painted this before I'm gluing it, and of course I sanded away some of the paint so I could get a good glue joint. But I also understand that doing this, no matter how careful you are, probably will mar the paint a little bit, but it's much easier to go back and touch up. Okay, I'm sorry my camera kind of quit on me as I was putting that trim on. I didn't realize it until it was too late, but I think you saw enough to get the idea of how I did that. I literally just started in a corner and clamped and worked my way along, gluing on the trim between the two floors, as well as this cornice that we made. And we got that all in place. I think it came out looking really good. I've been doing a little bit of weathering on this building, and for the weathering, I've been using these Monroe Models weathering powders, and I really like these for a lot of purposes, and these are working really well for here. The thing you need to know about the Monroe Models weathering powders, as opposed to like pan pastels or artist pastels, is that these have an adhesive built into the powder. So as you rub it on the model, it actually kind of breaks the molecules of that adhesive, and it helps it to stick, which means that you got to be very careful not to get too much of these on. I started off using some like grimy gray, thinking I would get some gray streaks, and it just was way too stark using these Monroe powders. But I've been using this dirty yellow, and on this building, I think it's actually coming out really nice. It's just giving a little bit of a weathering, streaking look without going too far. And I'm going to show you a little bit. Now, I've gone back and forth already and weathered some and then touched some up. You see I've done some weathering in this area right here, and you can see it's kind of left this yellow look on the windows. I have to go back and touch those windows up. I should have done this before I installed the windows, but I didn't. I'll show you how I install the windows in a minute too, but I'll show you how I do a little bit of this. I've done a little bit of touch-up paint right here, and so I'm going to come back and weather that a little bit. Just going to get just a very little bit on my brush for this, and I'm going to come in and just put it on, and you want to kind of rub it in, and that, again, that kind of breaks those molecules down of the adhesive and helps it to stick. You don't want to get too much of this on. If you do get too much, you can kind of come back and wipe it off with a cloth, but better off not getting too much to begin with. And see, that's literally all it takes to provide just a little bit of streaking across the structure. And if you rub it too much, these will tend to turn dark. I'm not sure exactly how that works or why. So you want to rub them on, get them to stick, but don't overwork them or they will tend to turn really dark. I want to show you a little something on the main structure here, the lower section. I've been working a little bit on the door, and here is a door as it comes in the kit, And if you stick it in this opening, you see it's too tall. It's too large. Well, as I got to looking at the instructions, I realized that this kit comes with some pieces that intend for this door to be inset like this, and there's some little walls that go along the sides. And that's why it's taller, but I don't want mine to be inset. My structure has the door right out at the front of the building, at the face of the building. So what I literally have done is, here's the door I'm using for this layout. I literally have just come and I have sanded the top and the bottom off of this door so that it will fit right in the opening. Also, the doors that on my structure that I'm modeling, the windows in the doors are long. You see this right here is how these windows look when this door comes. It's got this little short window and then this little square kind of a trim here. But I want them long, like this, full-length windows. That's how they are in the original. And so I've come in. I showed you exactly here how I do this. I came in and used this little piece of trim, the little square on the bottom as a guide. Decided I wanted to sand these down all the way to the bottom line of that, sand all of that out. So I came in with a pin vise and a small drill bit, and I just drilled a series of holes to kind of open that up. Then I came in with my hobby knife, as I have on this one, and just kind of used those holes as a way to cut that out and kind of carve it out and get it close. And then come in with a square needle file and have filed it out to make my full-length window the right width all the way down. I'll come back with a sanding stick and sand those just a little bit. And then this door, I'm going to paint, of course, the windows above and trim. I will paint those white like I've been doing on my building. But the doors are wood, so I'm going to paint them with a wood grain, a wood color. And we will work on that next, as well as still working to finish up painting all of those windows. Because I'm going to do some detailing and some lighting on the interior of this building, I need to be able to remove at least the back wall. And so I've been kind of working through that, and I've decided what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to put a solid floor in the bottom. This is the very bottom of the upper section. I'm going to glue that in place. And then I'm going to glue in some guides that will allow me to slide the back of this part of the building into place. And then some guides that will allow me to slide the roof into place, which will lock all of it down. And here I have the floor cut for this upper section. I've got it turned around upside down at the moment. And I've got this cut to fit. And I'm going to just glue this solidly into place. Now, this wall, as I think I had told you before, has a little bit of bow in the front. It's bowing to the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this in the center first. Let that set up a little bit. I'm going to work my way to the outside and allow this wall to be a stiffener to help straighten that, this floor. Allow the floor to be a stiffener to help straighten the front wall. And here's one last look at this upper section as I've put these guides in along the top. Made those out of 30 thousandths by 80 thousandths styrene strip and left just enough space for a piece of 40 thousandths styrene to fit in between. Did the same on the ends, allowing the window pieces to be the inside guide and a piece of 30 thou by 80 thou strip on the sides, and also a little piece of square styrene stock here just to hold the back wall into place. And I've cut the back wall and the roof, and literally this just goes together like a puzzle box. I can slide the back wall into this slot, and the inside of that back wall I will paint black just to give some depth to any parts where the light, where you might be able to see through. I don't think you'll be able to see in. And then you just slide the roof into place like this, and slide it all the way forward. Of course, we'll be painting that too. The roof locks the back wall into place, and there we have that section, the upper section of the building. I will be putting a floor in between the two, and I'll probably be gluing it into place permanently. It doesn't need to come out. But I'm going to light at least one section. I think probably this very top floor, these three windows are going to make like one room. Probably put a shade over one, but light all three so that you'll see some light coming through the shade and also light coming through these two windows. I'll put probably some wallpaper, something to give you something to see if you look in there. It's going to be hard to see very much. just because of where it's going to be on the layout and its sheer size. But the lighting will give it some effect. I might put a figure or two inside there that you would be able to see as well. Now turning to this lower section of the hotel, I think I'm going to do exactly the same thing with this lower section as I did with the upper section. I'm going to put a floor in between each story, and then I'm going to make a slide-in back wall and the roof as well. Of course, the roof of this section will actually be connected to the bottom of the upper section, so they'll be one piece. So the upper section and roof will slide in, and that'll lock in the back wall, and that'll allow me to access the interiors of what I'm going to detail here. I wanted to give you one more look at the hotel as it is now. We still obviously have a long way to go. Sometimes this detailed work on a structure of this nature can be slow progress, but patience and taking your time pays off in the rewards of a nice-looking structure when you're finished. I think the structure is coming along very well, and I think I'm going to be pleased with the finished product when we get there. Remember to join me in 3 weeks for part 3 of this series, where I'll be adding the final details, including some interior details and interior lighting to this structure, and I'll show you how it fits into my layout. I hope you've enjoyed this video today. If so, give it a thumbs up down below. Also, please be sure and leave a comment or a question at the bottom of the page. Tell me about some of the kit bashing that you have done and what your results have been like. If you found this video helpful or useful, please be sure and share it on your social media or model railroad forums that you participate in so others can enjoy this and other episodes of Ron's Trains and Things as well. And of course, be sure and check out that expanded description right below this video. There you can learn about my Patreon page and the rewards and incentives that I offer to those who support my channel. Or if you'd like to support Ron's Trains and Things with a one-time gift, you can do so through my PayPal Me account, and that link is also in the channel below. Finally, be sure and check out my Amazon Pick of the Week. You'll see there some things that I found interesting this week and that you might find interesting as well. Well, that's all I have for today on Ron's Trains and Things. But be sure and watch for that scenery building video next week, and join me in 3 weeks for the final installment of this Holt Hotel Kit Bash, and I look forward to seeing you then. Lizzie?